Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special session of Onward Ozarks. I'm Randy Wilburn, host of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast and your moderator today. Today, we're tackling a big, important topic. How do we shape the future of talent in Northwest Arkansas and make this place where Gen Z wants to build their lives and careers? By 2030, Gen Z will represent nearly 30% of the U.S. workforce. They're purpose driven, socially conscious, and expect more from the places they work and live. If we want to attract and retain this next generation of talent, we have to understand what they value and what they're looking for, not just in a job, but in a community. We've assembled a powerhouse panel to help us explore this from multiple angles: national data, education pipelines, and real world hiring. Let me introduce them to you. First up, from Gallup, we have Zach Reinowski, a senior education researcher who leads some of Gallup's largest national surveys, including multi year work with the Walton Family Foundation and Lumina Foundation. Zach brings us a big picture view of what Gen Z really wants from work, life, and learning, backed by hard data. Next, from the University of Arkansas, is Donna Catherine Graham, Director of Industry and Community Engagement. And as she likes to say, she's the person on the front porch at the U of A. Donna plays a vital role in connecting companies with campus and making it easier to collaborate with the university. She's at the center of efforts to ensure that the U of A isn't just educating talent, it's helping them stay and thrive right here in Arkansas, and especially Northwest Arkansas. And finally, from Acres, we have Morgan Scholes. Morgan is the Chief People Officer. Morgan has helped grow and support some of the most innovative startups in the region, including Be Unlimited and Acre Trader. At Acres, she leads HR and people strategy, including a robust internship pipeline, and she brings a small business lens to recruiting and retaining Gen Z here in Northwest Arkansas. Let's dive in. Panelists, I want to welcome you. I hope you guys are doing well today. Good, good,
I'm
good.
great. Thank you, Randy.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so we want to jump right into this, and I figured I would go to the numbers guy and the stats, because numbers never lie, right? But Zach, I want to kick this conversation off by and before I do that, just as some housekeeping, we have some giveaways today, but you have to remain with us throughout the whole 60 minutes. Okay, we've got some wonderful Walmart gift cards that we're going to give away throughout, but you have to be present, and I'll call your name and you'll have to wave your hand in the chat. And if you do that, we'll acknowledge you, and somebody on the back end at the Northwest Arkansas Council will reach out to you and take your information and go ahead and get you that bonus, that gift card, as a way of just saying thank you for participating in this event, a topic that is extremely important to so many. So we want to thank you again for being here. Zach, what does Gallup research tell us about what Gen Z values most in work and life? And how is this different from millennials or Gen X?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, thanks, Randy, for being here, and to the Northwest Arkansas Council for the invitation. Gallup has been partnering with the Walton Family Foundation for the better part of 3 years now on what we call the Voices of Gen Z study. And that was designed because we had this sense that there was a lot of talking about Gen Z, but not a lot of talking with Gen Z. And there were a lot of conceptions and misconceptions about what Gen Z wanted, what their priorities were, how they felt about the world around them. And as you mentioned, we didn't really have a lot of great data around that. So we wanted to quantify it, really put some numbers to the beliefs out there that people had. And what we find is that before we even talk about what's important to Gen Z in a job, I think it's also important to center up where a job and the importance of a dream job, so to speak, falls in Gen Z's priorities overall. And in that respect, we find that getting their dream job is certainly an important aspect of their overall life. We found that 88% of Gen Zers say that having their dream job is either very important or somewhat important to their life goals overall. But when you look at the percentage who say it's very important, who assign that top priority to having a great life and the role that a dream job plays in that, that percentage is actually just 45% of Gen Zers who say having their dream job is very important to having a great life. And that's lower than things like earning enough to live comfortably, which is, of course, a part of having a job, but they're really thinking about that as, am I earning enough to sort of sustain myself and, support my lifestyle? As well as having close relationships with friends and family and having times for their hobbies and their personal interests, all of which are at about 70% or above. So broadly speaking, Gen Z definitely wants to have a great job and their dream job, but it's much less important to them than having a fulfilling personal life and relationships with the people around them. So with that stage being set, all of Gen Zers, or almost all of them, are going to need a job. So it is still important to understand, even if they're prioritizing it a little bit less than their personal lives, what that great job looks like. And we have asked Gen Z that very question, which is, when you think about having your dream job, what does that look like? And what we've consistently found there is that Gen Z adults in particular are much more likely to prioritize a job that does something that you already mentioned, Randy, which is it allows them to pursue something that they're passionate about. 72% of Gen Zers say that their dream job allows them to do something they're passionate about. 45% of them say it should allow them to be creative or innovative. 41% say that it should allow them to make a difference in their communities. And that is all far higher than the percentage who say that they would need a job that pays them enough to make them wealthy, which is only 26% of Gen Zers, or that offers them a pathway to a high status or managerial position. Only 12% of Gen Zers want that type of a job. So broadly speaking, what's important to them in a great job, it allows them to do something they care about and to make a difference in their community far more than sort of maybe the old school prior generations priorities of, it gives me a pathway to advancement and a pathway to higher levels of income. They want to understand their role in the organization. They want to know how what they're doing day to day impacts the mission and how that mission is impacting the world around them, much more so than looking out for themselves and wanting to squeeze, every dollar or every advancement opportunity out of the jobs that they have.
Yeah, man, that is some great information. I think the challenge that a lot of employers have is, how do you bridge the gap with that thinking, right? And in terms of, how do I, as and I'm a Gen X, okay, so just putting it out there, but how do I speak the language of Gen Z in everything that you just described, right? Because things matter to these young people in a different way than maybe they mattered to me when I got out of college in 1991, and I was just looking for a job. I wanted a paycheck. I just wanted to get paid, and I would figure out the rest later. These guys are, I don't necessarily say that I was looking for something that meaningful beyond a paycheck. But now when I talk to these young people, they have much different aspirations than, a lot of Gen X folks, and certainly the baby boomers did, when they were matriculating through higher education. So I think it's just really interesting, that what they say, what got you here won't take you to the next level, right? And so you have to constantly iterate and think differently. And I think part of it is, as the information that you're sharing, employers, especially employers here in Northwest Arkansas, need to be thinking differently about how to attract and retain that amazing talent that's coming out of programs like the University of Arkansas and other spaces. And so, and with that said, that teased it up nicely for Donna. I certainly want to ask you, Donna, because I know inquiring minds want to know, how is the U of A preparing students, not just with degrees, okay, but with professional and social skills employers are looking for?
Sure. So there's lots of good reasons to go to college beyond just getting a job. But this is something we know practically is meaningful, and parents want to know about it. They want to know what career outcomes they can expect from different majors. And we have really taken what we call a career everywhere approach to preparing our students. We do have our Office of Career Connections, which will be busy all fall long putting on career fairs. So if you're interested in attending, those are all the information is available on the website at career.uark.edu. But we try to embed career readiness programming in everything we do. From their freshman first year experience course, they're hearing about it from day one. And I also think just sort of level setting what their timeline is. Most students will do their traditional internship, often for academic credit, between their junior and senior year, but you have to get some experiences between that freshman and sophomore year in order to be competitive for those internships with students across the country. So we're helping them figure out ways to get that project experience, leadership experience. And I will say, from what I see of this generation, they are very programmed, they are very busy, and they also are competitive and hungry for it. So I see them working really hard to build those resumes from day one. I'll see sometimes new students on LinkedIn, and they're using LinkedIn in ways that I was not thinking about selling myself as a professional as an 18-year-old, the way I see them doing it. So yeah, we really try to say it's not just our Office of Career Connections job, it's everyone's job to be getting these students career ready.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I've had the privilege of doing a session with incoming and second year MBA students at the Sam Walton College of Business for several years now, and I'm thankful for them for that opportunity. But one of the big takeaways that I've had in interacting with those young people, especially with as well as just regular students that are in undergrad, that they are way more engaged on LinkedIn. They understand or get it, especially because there's a lot of professors at the U of A that really prepare them and say, hey, guys, you have to put yourself out there. And I think that's one of the differences that you'll find, especially with this generation. Of course, we know that they are almost digitally native. So that's their language. They speak that language. So for them, it's easy to get on LinkedIn and start talking about projects that they're working on in their classes. And then, oh, this internship that I'm doing with OEI or the Macmillan Innovation Studio or something like that. And so I think that they just find it easier to do that. And it's just, I think it's incumbent upon employers to be able to tap into that and make those connections with these young people early on. Because if nothing else, I think you've just shared a key point is that even before a company has a need, they should be trying to interact and connect with some of these young people while they're still going through school, right? Even before they raise their hand and say, I want a job, it's like, you want to dig a well before you need the water. And so, you have to go ahead and do that. So I think it's really important, and I'm certainly glad that you're able to do that, especially with this week being the week that all these new students are enrolling and coming into the U of A for the first time. And, I saw some post on Facebook last night, and, parents are talking about dropping their kids off. And of course it gets sentimental, but, I read one dad's post, and he was just talking about, wow, I'm really excited for this next level that my child is about to embark on, and I hope that the U of A will take good care of them, which I know they will. So that's exciting to hear that. Morgan, I want to talk to you about your perspective as a hiring strategist, as an HR professional, as somebody that, when you find good talent, you want to keep that good talent, right? Because it's one thing to find them, it's a whole nother thing to be able to keep them. But what trends are you seeing from the employer perspective, and how Gen Z evaluates where to live and work,
Mhm.
particularly here in Northwest Arkansas?
Yeah. Well, I would say that we've had incredible experiences with hiring Gen Z employees, and very consistently been amazed and surprised and done anything we could to retain them once they finish their tenure as an intern. For I would say quite a few. And so in terms of trends, I think folks, once they come to the area or if they grow up here, there is a high proclivity towards retention in this region. And so there's a lot of positive sentiment around the growth in Northwest Arkansas. There's lots to do. I've got several interns and the new hires who have relocated from big cities for this opportunity or for school, and they love the vibrancy of this region and of course the access to outdoor outdoor activities and things like that. But they also love that it's not huge and too expansive. The flip side of that is I think there's a pretty common sentiment that the job market is really tough here for students fresh out of school. And so in some ways that makes retention a little bit easier because they're like, wow, I got a job. This was really, really hard to do. Whereas if I were in Dallas or Chicago, I'll just pop into the next big building and probably find something entry level. But entry level positions that are open to hiring students who may not have, had a full-time job before, those are a little bit more challenging here for them to find in the area. And so I think that the opportunity here for all of us is to really broadcast what those jobs are. And my invitation, of course, to every employer is to any job that you're about to post, consider if it could be an internship first or 2 internships and create more opportunities for this very, very, very ambitious and, in my experience, extremely hardworking and innovative generation. And I think that's something that we as employers and as community leaders have an opportunity to rethink. And I think that's what we did a couple of years ago. We had only ever hired full-time employees at my company, and then we started breaking things down. Like, can this be 2 separate positions that we hire part-time or interns for and get them in? And it's an incredibly validating hiring strategy, because if you hire someone for an internship, you see firsthand their work experience, and they have the benefit of the experience. You have the benefit of seeing what they are capable of, and the dividends, it has just very consistently paid off for us.
Yeah, yeah. And I think yeah, it's really interesting right now, and I like the way that you kind of are breaking up roles and creating multiple opportunities or touch points for internships, because that gives people a chance to try different things. It also gives you as an organization a chance to test the waters with folks in a limited capacity that helps you determine whether or not this makes sense for a longer term role, or is this something that we need to roll up into something else. And of course, I hate to even admit these 2 letters, but, AI is going to fundamentally change a lot of how we do that in the future. But I also think it's going to create tremendous opportunities for us. And I think it's something that the Gen Z young people that I talk to, they're really embracing that. And I think that's another benefit that is going to be brought to the table to local employers that are here. And so we'll definitely chat more about that. Zach, I want to come back up to you and talk and ask you about, specifically with regard to just the mindset of Gen Z. What is the most surprising insight you've uncovered about Gen Z and the workforce or education system, when it comes to how they look at both of those, right? So how they look at the workforce and then also the education system.
Yeah, I mean, that's like asking me to pick my favorite child, which I don't have any kids, but I may have a favorite child when I do. But it's hard. It is still difficult. I would say that, broadly speaking, one of the biggest misconceptions, again, that caused us to start this research with the Walton Family Foundation was Gen Z has this rap, and I think it's an unfair one, for being entitled and lazy and disengaged. And I think even a couple of years ago, that, and still persisting today, that is a little bit of the narrative in the larger media about, like, what do we do with this new generation that's becoming now a larger part of the workforce than the baby boomers? How are we going to deal with this? And I think it's important to stop for a second and think about where the generation came from, right? This generation was born between 1997 and 2012. So many of them are probably children of the groups that were hit hardest by the 2008 recession. So they may have seen their parents lose their jobs or even their homes. Many of them were not even alive during 9/11 and right after that, when the country was in a united place. So they've seen, a society that's politicized and polarized and in upheaval. Meanwhile, technology, as you mentioned, Randy, is moving at an incredibly fast pace, and they're having to keep up with that in a very high stakes way, where they're trying to break into a workforce that's evolving under their feet. So with all of that context, I think, it would be fair for them to feel a little bit overwhelmed and disengaged from the circumstances that they've been living in for basically their entire lives. But here's the thing. I don't think they are. They're not lazy. They're not entitled. They're not disengaged. Do they have some disillusionment? Do they feel like the people who are in power and making policies are maybe not looking out for them? and their generation's needs? Yes. Are they intensely distrustful of large American institutions? Yes. But when you ask Gen Zers, what do you think about your future? How do you think things are going? 84% of them will tell you that they think they have a great future ahead of them. They're very optimistic. As I mentioned earlier, they are incredibly, they prioritize at an incredibly high level, doing well for their communities, doing good for people around them. And so, again, when you're thinking about education, when you're thinking about the workforce, communicating the ways in which you're helping Gen Z become a part of the solution, allowing them to make an impact to correct some of those societal challenges that they've seen and identified as really important to them. Again, they are not disengaged. They are not lazy. If you show them that what they're doing makes a difference, they're going to do it, and they're going to jump in with both feet. So I think if you're an employer or even an institution of higher education that's trying to demonstrate why Gen Z should put their time and effort, which again, they do value, they don't just, prioritize a job because that's what they're supposed to do. They value their lives, their well-being, all of that. Making sure that their work in education is a part of their holistic well-being and not something that sits outside of it and maybe even detracts from it is going to be really important to engaging with this generation.
Yeah. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of companies, and one of the first things that I tell them is that, to retain good talent, you've got to personally and professionally develop them, right? So you want to give them the skills and tools necessary to be successful in the larger environment. And so even with companies, I'm like, listen, and I hate using this word soft skills, but it's like, yeah, train them on soft skills, train them on the simple things like active listening and basic communication skills and relationship building, all of these things that a lot of times companies are like, well, what's the ROI with that? Well, the ROI can be tremendous, right? Because a lot of the older folks, right, Gen X and others, a lot of that stuff we got automatically because of how we were raised and the time that we grew up in. But it's different now, and I think companies could it really serve them well to kind of take a step back by focusing on some of those foundational skill sets that will serve young people well moving into the future. And it's not that they'll remember it, but they will know they will remember where they got that foundational teaching, and they'll have a much stronger tie or connection to those organizations that were there to kind of hold their hand through that part of the process. And I think it's just important for people to understand that. I wanted to follow up, Zach, with another question that was brought up. Brady Carmen asked, he said, thanks for sharing these stats for Gen Z study participants. I would love to know how those stats compared to other generational groups.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one of the hardest ones to answer just because there are so many circumstances that impact the way that people respond. And you also don't want to just be comparing, for example, Gen Z today to baby boomers today or Gen X today, because you're at different stages in your life. You have different priorities. If you're a Gen Zer, you're probably between the ages, if you're in the workforce, of 18 and 28, you're probably less likely to have a home, to have children, to have dependents. Your priorities in the workplace change. So I hear a lot of people say, well, of course they love, something they're passionate about because they don't have to pay the bills or pay their kids' college tuition. It's really easy to be, focusing on those things when you don't have those competing priorities. But with all of that said, I will say we are seeing indications that Gen Z prioritizes these things more than prior generations. If you were to look at certainly baby boomers, to a certain extent, Gen Xers, millennials and Gen Zers have been moving more towards, I want a job that allows me to pursue something that I'm passionate about, that focuses on my development, which is something you've raised a couple of times now, Randy. I want someone who invests in me. I want a coach, not a boss. I want to see what my role is in the organization. So those are things that Gen Z is prioritizing at higher rates. And again, we don't always have the ability to look at, baby boomers when they were 18 to 28 or Gen X when they were 18 to 28. So there may be a little bit of variance there. But with all of that said, I just want to remind everybody, Gen Z, they're not aliens. They're just like you as me as a millennial, you as a Gen X or Randy. If there are any baby boomers out there, they're not aliens. We can just look at some things that we're seeing in national Gallup research around job prioritizations. And what we know is more than half of US workers right now are actively watching for or seeking a new job opportunity. That's the highest rate since 2015. So if you're an employer out there, this is a risk, but it's also an opportunity, because if you can do a better job of attracting these Gen Z workers who, by the way, are saying they're looking for new jobs because they want greater work-life balance and greater focus on their personal well-being. They want greater stability and job security. As you mentioned, Randy, AI is threatening a lot of these entry-level AI jobs that Gen Zers are in or looking to step into. So they're worried about that. And they just want a job that allows them to do what they do best, that leverages their talents. So these are things that are broadly applicable. If you're out there on a hiring level, this is something that applies to Gen Z. It also applies to just anybody out there if you're looking to attract talent. But for Gen Z in particular, there is one unique reason why we see they're actively looking for a new job. And that's that they want a job that allows them to accelerate their professional development far more than any generation right now. So if you're looking for sort of the handbook on how to attract Gen Zers, that's sort of the 5-point plan that I would point you to.
I love that. Yeah, please.
So this is, I'm wildly passionate about this. I think that just kind of the tangible connection of the dots between what Zach is saying and like they want like a purpose and impact and to learn. What that looks like as an employer is creating very clear and high level expectations. So we tend to think about internships and hiring entry level positions as like task management. And my encouragement to you, if you are creating these, is to think about it in terms of like real responsibilities that directly correlate to impact on the business. And so we don't think about interns as like, hey, I need someone to do this busy work for me. When I hire an intern, it's because I have something that needs to be done for our business to move forward. And so rather than give them a list and a checklist of tasks that they need to complete by the end of the day, we give them objectives and responsibilities and ownership. And then we exist as a leadership and management team to support them and counsel and train and coach them in every way possible. But that meaning and that impact that Zach is talking about, it doesn't have to be like, oh, how does this job promote world peace? It's how does my work impact the outcomes of this business? And if you can create that opportunity and then give them autonomy and ownership, that's a very, very meaningful experience. And then my other, kind of tangible in this is like set the bar high. And we like to, I think I've seen a lot of, and this is training I do with our hiring managers of like, okay, I just want to ease them into it. No way, drop them in the deep end and give yourself tons of room to be blown away and surprised. And so, I think that them finding meaning and value and learning opportunity, that doesn't have to be, like this big, how does this contribute globally, but like, hey, what is the meaning and impact of your contribution on this company and our local community here?
Yeah, I love that. And, Don, I saw you nodding your head a few times. Did you want to add anything to that specifically?
Sure. No, I think that there is a certain practicality to Gen Z. I mean, they know they want professional development. They've seen some things happen in their lifetime, and they just want to know that there's a path forward. Another thing I see though is their entrepreneurial spirit and sort of this gig economy they live in. I mean, there's a way for them to be nimble if something's not working out and figure out a way to pay the bills. There's just so many different ways to do it now. And I think that they're really good about it. Um, yeah, I think that their entrepreneurial spirit makes a big difference. And when I was in college, these things didn't exist. So there's
Yeah.
a whole different kind of competitive field of options for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, listen, I want to just take a quick pause in the conversation. It's time for one of our Walmart gift card giveaways. And I want to just give a shout out to Walmart as a founding member of the Northwest Arkansas Council. They've been involved with Onward Ozarks since day one. And so I really want to thank them. But we're giving away a $100 Walmart gift card to one lucky attendee, but you've got to be here live to win. And the winner is Sandra Huey. Sandra Huey, if you are here, please raise your hand in the chat, and Josiah or one of the other Northwest Arkansas Council team folks will go ahead and acknowledge you and give you some additional information so they can get that gift card to you. Sandra Huey, if you're here, we'll go ahead and take good care of you, and then we'll just go from there. But now I want to get back to the conversation because this is rich, and there's a lot of different directions, and some of the questions are flying in here that now I'm just trying to decide which route that I want to take with this. But based on what you guys said, Sandra Huey said she's here, Josiah. So Sandra, make sure you put you gave your email address, and Josiah will take care of that for you. Um, I wanted to ask specifically one of the things that came up, and this is an issue that now is coming up more often than not. And Donnie, you might talk about this in terms of what do you say to young people that are about to embark upon graduating from the U of A about, you're trying to convince them to consider staying in Northwest Arkansas, but the first thing that you hear out of their mouth is it's kind of expensive to live here. The housing market is tough, right? And that's a real issue. And I'd love to just kind of get your take on it specifically, and then also Morgan's, because I know you have to deal with that as well. And that was something that Kathleen brought up. And it's, we are trying to, I think people forget that Northwest Arkansas, we're still in our infancy in terms of growth. I mean, we're almost 600,000 people, when Dallas looks at us and says, oh, your guys are cute. You guys are not, you're nowhere near where we are. And I don't know that we want to be where they are, but the reality is that this place is going to continue to grow. And part of our growing pains are tied to our housing situation and the housing infrastructure here. I'd be curious to know specifically from you, Donna, and from you, Morgan, how you guys are addressing that when you talk to young people about saying, hey, you should stay here. Or we want to bring you here, but then the first thing out of their mouth is it's just too expensive.
So I'm glad you brought that up because it's really important to us here. So you might have read, we've got around 34,000 students for the fall semester, largest class ever. Around 50% of those students are out of state. And people may have varying opinions on how they feel about that, but we look at it as a really exciting opportunity to create new Arkansans. And we know we've got them here for 4 or 5 years, but we would love to retain them long term. Or, maybe they go off for a little bit and they're that boomerang alumni who comes back. And we're making a really concerted effort to track that and figure out how we can get these students more exposure to Arkansas beyond just their campus community. How do we get them up to Bentonville? How do we get them to Central Arkansas? How do we teach them about opportunities all across the state? And so I did a little research before this just to see how we're doing with retaining students. So we retain around 75% of Arkansas students in Arkansas after graduation and around 30% of the out-of-state students. And while Northwest Arkansas is expensive, Randy, to your point earlier, if it's a student from Dallas or, a student from Kansas City, I don't know that it seems that radically expensive to them. Now, they may not have the advantage of being able to live at home for a little bit and kind of offset some of those expenses as a new professional. But I think that Northwest Arkansas in particular is a really compelling place for young people to want to stay and live and work. And just the University of Arkansas, we're here for Arkansas, and we have a responsibility to help as part of our land grant mission to help all of Arkansas succeed. So we see ourselves, a key role is to be a talent importer and a talent pipeline. Oh, balloons.
I didn't plan that.
That's amazing. That's why you're the moderator, Randy.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, well,
anyways, it's important to us. And I think one of the things we can do is get them off campus and take them up to Bentonville. This spring, Walmart hosted a sophomore summit with hundreds of students from all over the country, including a lot from the University of Arkansas. And you know what? There's a chance if you're a Dallas student in Fayetteville, you might not know everything that's going on in Bentonville. So we've got to figure out how to get them up there. They may not have been to Central Arkansas. So we're always looking for opportunities to pack students on buses and take them to other parts of the state so they can see what the local economies and just what it's like to live there.
Yeah. And and just to piggyback on that before I let Morgan go, Walmart really does a good job in general of incorporating young people even before they graduate from college about getting them acclimated to what Northwest Arkansas is like holistically, like across every spectrum. And I give a shout out, especially to Sam's Club for their HBCU program. They bring in a lot of young people from all across the country to introduce them to Northwest Arkansas. And I get it that every company can't afford to necessarily do that, but there are companies out there, the JB Hunts, the Walmarts, the Tysons that are laying the foundation and the groundwork of introducing introducing Northwest Arkansas to a wider audience and saying, hey, this is a place that you can come and live. And yeah, not unlike other places, some things are expensive, but depending on how you work it, there are opportunities for everyone. But Morgan, I'd love for you to just chime in real quickly with the housing and specifically if you have any anecdotal stories related specifically to the housing issue when you're recruiting talent.
Sure. I was gonna really actually say the same thing that you just said, Randy, which is that it's expensive is relative. And so yes, it can be very difficult for someone to buy their first house here in Northwest Arkansas, but certainly no more difficult than it would be in larger MSAs that people are relocating from. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that people do move here inversely is because the cost of living is very, very good comparatively to larger regions and larger areas. And that quality of life, that's frankly what makes recruitment and relocation from out of state, which I do all the time, very easy for me. This is a beautiful area that's growing and has tons of incredibly attractive amenities, and the cost of living is relatively moderate. I will say, I guess I'm not trying to be dismissive. Like it's tough out there for sure. And I have lots of employees who this is, they've finished school, they're no longer eligible for student housing, and it's a struggle for them to find a place to live, especially in close proximity to their location. So I gathered, I have a group of, Gen Zers yesterday in preparation from this panel and just kind of asked them some questions like, what do you want? Why are you here? Do you want to stay or do you want to go? What would keep you? What would make you move? And very consistently, I think they emphasize that there is this tension, like between getting a good job and then being able to find a good place to live that's in moderate proximity to that job. And what they don't want is the Dallas experience where you have to drive 40 minutes to get 5 miles, to and from work. And the tension, the invitation, I think, for us is to find that balance between moderate cost of living and quality of life, because you see quality of life ratings go down, probably. I'm no, Zach might be able to speak to this. I'm totally making this up. But I imagine that quality of life goes down as commutes increase. And so if you are driving 5 minutes and, close to your office and you live and you work downtown and there's walkability and all of these wonderful things that I associate with Northwest Arkansas, that's great. And then if that changes to a 50-minute drive and you're spending 2 hours a day in your car, that impacts everything else in your life, your ability to exercise, enjoy nature, spend time with your family, pursue hobbies, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that expensive is relative, but at the same time, there is this growing concern, especially among Gen Z, that with the growth of the region, there will be this continuing separation between good jobs and reasonable places to work and the proximity between the two.
Yeah.
Reasonable places to live, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Zach, I'd love for you just to add to that from Gallup's perspective, any data that you can tie in with regard to how Gen Z specifically is viewing housing, right? Because I mean, I know, I listen to Scott Galloway and others talk about how, the baby boomers have taken away the opportunity for Gen Z to become homeowners and a lot of other issues along that. I don't know if it's that simple of a issue, but I do know that a lot of Gen Z people look at housing a lot differently than how I looked at housing when I graduated from college. And so I'd be curious to know if you want to share any additional data points around that.
Sure. What we know is it's a very daunting proposition right now for Gen Zers to feel like they can break into the housing market anywhere. And in fact, many of them are just skeptical of whether they ever will own a house, to the extent that when we asked that question earlier that I mentioned about, how important are the following things personally to you having a great life in the future, only 43% of them say that buying a house is very important. So they're deprioritizing it, not partly because it seems out of reach for them. And they're saying, well, I'm not going to be able to break in, so I don't want to make this a big cornerstone of my life because it just seems out of reach. By the way, we also see similar trends in other sort of traditional family life metrics like having children, only 29% say, having children is very important to having a great life. Just under half say that getting married or finding a life partner is very important. So when you look at what they're prioritizing, how they're thinking about their lives in the future, there are certainly institutional factors like the market that are contributing to this, but we do see them as a result deprioritizing some of those traditional markers of, adult life, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. And it's funny, Robert Sean McGrew had actually made a comment. He said, so besides the housing, another issue keeping younger generations local is what is there to do? How do we retain them, as NWA is known to be more for families, but singles tend to be left out even today, that's a legitimate issue. And, I know that's certainly something that everybody's trying to combat. I mean, the council's working on things of that nature. There's so many organizations out there that are trying to connect different ones together. And I would say this, I've been very impressed in the last 11 years that I've been here that Northwest Arkansas seems to try to go above and beyond when it comes to creating opportunities for people to get together. Some of it is that you just have to put yourself out there too, right? I mean, nobody's going to come to your house and knock on your door and bring you outside. You're going to have to go outside and see what's out there. But Morgan, do you want to share anything specifically on that?
Yeah, sure. I think I don't know, the folks I talk to and hire here, there's a correlation, right? Like they live here because they like the things that there are the things there are to do here, right? So they're very drawn to being outdoors and adventurous and the sort of like benchmark activities of Northwest Arkansas. And I think that the students who want a big city and nightlife and things like that, which we definitely don't have here in Northwest Arkansas. There's no good club scene. Those are the folks who move, and so I think I don't know that there's a huge need to like kind of create activity rather than acknowledge that what we've got. And I think we as a region do a really good job of that. Like, hey, do you like being outdoors and biking, hiking, climbing, kayaking, running? Do you like good food and being connected to nature and your community? We do those things really well, and people who are interested and value those things and want a slower, more intentional kind of pace and community experience are drawn to this area and want to stay and grow their families here. And even I think we see this a lot. I've seen it a lot with students I've hired. Even if they don't plan to start a family, what happens over the course of their 4 years of being a student, Donna, you could probably speak to this, is their parents visit a ton and they're like, you know what? I like Northwest Arkansas. I think I will move here too. And so we're seeing more like generational spread relocating to Northwest Arkansas. And so yeah, I don't know. I guess I'd feel reticent to say there's nothing to do here because I think there's lots to do, and the people who like doing those certain things are the folks who want to stay.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention something that all of you have discussed, and with like the housing issue specifically, the elephant in the room, and that room is not just Northwest Arkansas, it's the whole United States, right? I mean, when you think of I mean, we're I think the last number I saw was we're off by like 3.5 million homes that have needed to been built that weren't built after the financial collapse of 2008. So the reality is that, the issues that Northwest Arkansas is facing as it pertains to housing is a national issue. It's not just a Northwest Arkansas thing. The thing that I would encourage local individuals to do is to get involved with organizations like ULI. And anytime that you see the council putting on programs like housing, like Groundwork does, talking about housing, there are tremendous opportunities for you to be at the kitchen table having these discussions about what you want to see in Northwest Arkansas in the next 15 or 20 years. I plan to stay here for a while. I get involved in those conversations, and the only benefit is that it makes for a better outcome for my kids and hopefully my kids' kids if they decide to stay and remain in this area. But we all have to get involved, especially around the housing issue, to put the pressure on local communities and counties and towns to do what's right when it comes to housing. So I think that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we can't really solve that problem instantly, but the way that we can solve it is to get actively involved around that because it will make a big difference. One question did come up, and I want to pose this to you. I'm having to move around here, but before I do that, I want to announce the second winner, and that is Lauren Allen. Lauren Allen, come on down. You won a $100 gift card for Walmart. Please show or make yourself available via the chat, and we'll make sure to get you that information. Just give us your email address, and we'll take care of that. We have one more gift card to give away, and I'll do that right at the end. So you got to stay here to get your gift card. Now, this is a really good question that I know a lot of people hear all the time, and I actually I want to hear from all three of you. But Brett Parker from Stoneward said, for Gen Z, the barrier I'm finding is unrealistic expectations. The majority applying after college or with 1 year of experience are seeking near six-figure salaries, and some of the initial questions I hear within the interview process is about vacation days or work-life balance. And I understand the importance of this, but don't know how to set realistic expectations without breaking their spirit. Can you provide any guidance on that particular issue? And Morgan, since I know that you deal directly with folks like that, I'd love to hear your thoughts as an employer, and then I certainly want to hear from Donna, and I want to hear maybe some strategies from Zach around that.
Yes, I lit up as I was hearing this question. I think that it's always the job of the employer to very clearly set expectations. And so when I hire, I have a 15-minute screening call with any candidate before they go through our full interview process. And I ask those questions. Hey, here we call it the logistics of the position, our expectations, your expectations, compensation, location, experience. And I always ask, what is most important to you? And I think hearing that gives you as an employer the opportunity to be very candid up front about if this job if there is alignment between what you as a company and employer need and what is most important to that individual. And candidly, even if I have someone whose compensation expectations are way beyond that I have available for the role, when I ask them that question, what is most important to you? It's never ever money. It is never, hey, I'm going to take the highest paying job that I can get. And it's really about the quality of experience, the opportunity to make impact, and the team that they are going to be working with. And so I would say, I would say that our opportunity and invitation is to ask what's most important and to walk into an employment agreement with that understanding. And I tell candidates all the time, like, how I frame these conversations is I say, what are your compensation goals for your next role? And sometimes they say, well, what does this role pay? And I say, I asked you first. And then they say, I'm looking for this amount. And I'll say, cool. The range that I have for this position is this amount. That's way different than what you stated. Should we discontinue this conversation? And then they're like, oh, actually, no, I can do that. And what's really most important to me is an opportunity for growth and knowing that I'll get to work in XYZ settings and learn XYZ things. And so I think that we always have an opportunity to calibrate on that, but that needs to happen like day one, moment one in the interview conversation and process, where you are hopefully getting alignment between what's most important to your company and what is most important to the individual. And if there's a disparity between the two, that's fine, but you can find that out early on and help set expectations.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really helpful. Donna, do you want to add to that or share your thoughts around that concept?
I think what Morgan said makes total sense. I don't have any data to support this, but I have a hunch that some of this lifestyle creep and expectations is a result of social media and what you see. I think that a lot of what you see is, oh, the corporate girly with the amazing apartment and the amazing job and the amazing wardrobe. But the truth is that's somebody on the internet making money. That's not real. And so I almost wonder if there's a mentoring opportunity or some more financial literacy opportunities where we can just coach and sort of level set expectations and say, hey, you saw that, but just so you know, if you're not achieving that at job one after graduation, most people aren't. Most of us have to kind of crawl before we walk. And it's not always glamorous, right? When you graduate, a lot of us drive a clunker and have three roommates. That's okay for a little bit. So I think that, I think what Morgan said, just level setting the expectation, and maybe there's a mentoring opportunity there just around setting expectations, and an employer can say, hey, here's where you are now, but here's the path over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll add, I have personally never ever had a recent college graduate have a six-figure salary expectation personally. And I would say I've probably talked to hundreds at this point in Northwest Arkansas. So I don't know,
Yeah.
just anecdotally.
Zach, you want to add something to that?
With the disclaimer that I'm a stats nerd who does not have the responsibility for hiring or managing anybody but myself, which is a tenuous experience at best. I would say I would ask the question, and I don't want to, undermine Brett's experience, because I trust that his experience is real. But I agree with Morgan that, when we talk to Gen Z, their expectations are not around, I want to make the most amount of money possible. For the most part, it's, I want to live comfortably. So my question would be, is what they're asking for that unreasonable? Because what I see is a six-figure salary, and I don't know the ins and outs of where Brett is and how reasonable that is. But, in some ways that might be what it takes to have a reasonable cost of living and afford rent and groceries and all of that. The work-life balance piece, I think there is a paradigm shift for this generation that, again, as I mentioned, has seen the evolution of the types of jobs that their parents took. And especially if they were in the recession, losing a job, seeing the way that their parents were maybe treated or the ways that their jobs impacted them. Gen Z is not afraid, and this is just a broad strokes statement. Gen Z is not afraid to challenge the current paradigm or say, just because we've been doing it this way forever, I don't necessarily think that's the right way. And, I've seen a time when, job used to be you were there for 30 years and the company took care of you and you got a pension and, you felt like your employer took care of you. Gen Zers have never lived in a time when that was the case, and they don't see that. And so they're maybe thinking to themselves, well, I kind of have to look out for myself, and I have to ask for my expectations, and I need to look out for my well-being. And I'm going to make those expectations clear when I walk into the room. Doesn't mean you need to hire them. Doesn't mean you need to say that those expectations are reasonable. But I think from the standpoint of a Gen Zer coming in and saying, this is what I need from a job, they aren't afraid to prioritize their mental health and their well-being and their individual needs. Well, again, at the same time saying, I don't need a job that's going to pay me $1 million and make me extremely wealthy. I need something that's going to help me take care of myself. And, again, I need a job that's going to fulfill me personally. So I would maybe flip the question back and ask, like, is what they're asking all that unreasonable? Allowing for exceptions of, and I think that's true of every generation. There were millennials who had unrealistic salary expectations, probably continue to have unrealistic salary expectations. So I don't think this is a uniquely Gen Z phenomenon.
Yeah, it's not. But I also would venture to say that I think everyone on this call should understand that Gen Z is dealing with a flow of information unlike any other generation has experienced. So my point is simply, when I graduated from college in 91, I didn't have a lot of anecdotal evidence backing anything up when I was going out for a job. Again, I was happy to get what I got, and I didn't have like 1,000 other people telling me, this is how you approach this job search and this is how you get that. Nowadays, you go on TikTok, you get advice from career coaches and all that are instantly are available to you. And I think you have to recognize that this is the information that people are getting. Some of it's right, some of it is incorrect, but as an employer, you have to be aware that these young people that are coming through these doors and interviewing with you have access to information that some of us only dreamed of when we were starting out getting into the workforce. So that's another issue that I think is sometimes we forget that.
Yeah. And I would just like to add the difference between framing something as a job versus an opportunity. And I think that if we frame something to someone as like, hey, this is here's what we need you to do, but here's the opportunity, here is the exposure that you will have to different, kind of sub departments and sub businesses. This is what you can expect to see added to your resume after a year working here, and I will leverage my connections and my network for you at the completion of this time. I think that frames things a lot differently for them than this is a job, because the job is like very transactional. Like I need something and I get something, and I need to make sure I'm getting my needs taken care of, as Zach said. And an opportunity, there are just more intangibles. And I think if we can present jobs and internships as opportunities and be able to outline like the potential long-term career impact and implications beyond just like clock in, clock out, that has, in my experience, really changed the disposition of the candidate towards the role and what they're looking to get out of it.
Yeah. All right. So, and because you brought that up, I want to ask this question, since it did come up, and this question is specifically for Donna. Chuck Hyde asked, "How do we connect with U of A departments for internships, particularly in functions that are beyond just the core of our work?" Specifically that introduce young professionals to careers in the nonprofit sector, that maybe tap into their cause-driven mindset. And he gave an example of, we do great in the social work and public health fields, but we have other opportunities and needs for things like accounting, HR, marketing. Would love to give students in these fields meaningful work experience and a vision for what a career in nonprofits could also mean.
I'm
Can you speak to that?
Yes, I love this question. Thank you so much for that. So, we have a lot of different entry points for all types of companies across campus. Because we have such a large student body we need to serve, I'll be in a lot of trouble if I don't say use the career fair path, use Handshake, which is our job posting platform. But we have people like me. I'm working to help companies navigate across different units on campus. In each of our colleges, we have directors of employer relations who can offer more of a boutique type customer service experience for companies. If there's something you're looking for in terms of connecting with students that isn't on the website, that isn't on the menu, they can help you identify, okay, what's that course you could plug into? Or where are they looking for capstone projects for students to work on real world problems? We have the Macmillan Innovation Studio, where students work in interdisciplinary groups to solve real world problems. And it is every type of project you can imagine. So we have different people that you can connect with. I would visit career.uark.edu or partner.uark.edu. Those are two different places to kind of navigate through and find the right person, or also email me. But we want companies to be able to plug in beyond just Handshake, beyond just career fairs, and have those meaningful experiences with students. And the truth is, I mean, you want to start when they're freshmen. You know, you don't want to just show up for the first time at a career fair when they're juniors. You've got to start branding yourself early. And it's great to show up in different ways. And we can facilitate that.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. And can you give that a website address again?
Yes. So I would say partner.uark.edu,
Hmm.
or specifically to connect with the Career Services Office, you can go to career.uark.edu. And I know I was shouting out some student statistics earlier about retention in state and out of state, but there is a really neat Power BI program on that career.uark.edu where you can see career outcomes by major, starting salary info by major. And that would probably be a great place to direct students if you're having difficult conversations about salary, just to level set and say, hey, here's what people are making coming out of your major.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful. All right, so we do have one final winner. Sam Cheshire is the final winner of the Walmart gift card. Sam, if you are here, please make yourself available and known. And if not, then we're going to have to give it to somebody else. We have had so many really, great questions. I apologize that we couldn't get to each and every one of them. I would love for you guys to just continue to have this conversation. And really, the council does a really great job in all of these different areas, workforce development. I know there were a couple of questions specifically about the trades. And we didn't really get into that, but how do we get more? Is Gen Z even interested in working in the trades? And Zach, I would love for you just to answer that question really quickly. Is it something that Gen Z is even attracted to?
Yeah, the very short answer is yes. And the reason that they aren't is because they aren't hearing about it often enough. There is
Right.
an overcorrection, I think, that was well intended from, the 80s and 90s when there was the problem of tracking and, you're a college bound student and you're not, and you're going to the trades. In response to that, I think there was an overcorrection of, college is for everybody. That's the best path. That's the path you should be going down, to the detriment of the trades and vocational technology programs being the best option for some students. And so what we find is, especially for K-12 students, they are not hearing about anything other than college frequently or in enough detail for them to want to pursue it until it's too late. And so if you are a K-12 educator on this call, one, we love you. Thank you for what you do. And two, you are an incredibly important resource for students to understand the full landscape of what is available to them. And unfortunately, what we're finding is a lot of those alternatives, like vocational tech, like internships, like apprenticeships, just aren't being discussed. And they're the best options. And there's things that students are interested in, but they just don't know enough about them to pursue them. And so if we want to correct that, we need to make sure that we are prioritizing having that really broad discussion, not just about college.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I wish we could continue this conversation. So we're not gonna put a period in it, but this is a comma. So we are going to continue this conversation. You guys have been tremendous, and I want to thank all of our panelists for the insights and perspectives that they offered today. I think we've all walked away with even a little bit of a better understanding of how to attract, engage, and retain Gen Z talent in our region. And let's just say it's a work in progress, right? We're going to continue to get better, but from national trends to local actions, it's clear that if we want to thrive as a region, we need to invest in creating environments where the next generation can see their future. A big thank you to our audience. We had over 300 people register for this, and this is one of the biggest sessions that we've had for this program. And so I want to thank you for that. Shows you how important this topic is to Northwest Arkansas. Keep an eye on your inbox. We'll be sending out a link to the recording, and we'd love for you to share it with your team or network. And don't forget about the Walmart gift cards, with the ones that we gave away. And a big shout out to Walmart again for sponsoring those gift cards. But until next time, I'm Randy Wilburn. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Onward Ozarks. We will see you guys soon. Take care.